And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. The naked city, the city of about 360,000 stories. But tonight we're going to go to Washington, D.C. to talk about a very special one. Anyone who's watched this show, listened to this show, whether it be our analog AM radio days on WPRO, or our newer, more modern, spiffier version here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, knows that an issue that is near and dear to our hearts is, of course, advocating for and on behalf of the decriminalization of sex work in America. As a libertarian, I believe that agency of one's own body belongs to oneself, and one should be free to make decisions without regard to Big Brother, or in this case, Big Sister, standing over us. If in fact we have the natural right to self-determination, then one should be engaged in be able to engage in an act, a physical act of mutual benefit, whether it be for commerce, personal reasons, or all of the above. It's simply the individual's choice. As a culture, we continue to evolve and grow. And it is my great pleasure to welcome back to the show someone who now officially qualifies for reoffender status. Tamika Spellman is a political and advocacy support manager for an organization called HIPS. She's intimately involved with Decrim Now in Washington, D.C. She was with us just a short month or two ago to talk about and to relate the reality of quite frankly, the war front on sexual relations in this nation, particularly as it revolves around professional sex work. We use that category to include a wide swath of individuals, folks who might do it professionally on camera, on cam, in person, fetish work, all of which reflect an individual's career choice as well as another individual's choice to participate. Here in Rhode Island, if folks aren't familiar with it, for a number of years, sex work had effectively been decriminalized here in Rhode Island, as long as it was conducted indoors. There were those of us in the community who in those past years spoke out and decided that they would bring it back down behind closed doors into effectively, I'll call it rhetorically, the alleyways of Providence in Rhode Island. And clearly, as has been the experience nationwide, people have suffered mightily. So it was with a great enthusiasm that Tamika joined us and discussed the proposal, if you will, of the Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia City Council, being presented with the opportunity to decriminalize sex work, joining only selected portions of Nevada in doing so. It's been a tumultuous few months. The preparation for this, I would imagine, has been intense. So, with no further ado, Tamika, welcome back to the Coalition after an incredibly hectic week. You honor us by joining us here in Rhode Island on a Friday night. Thanks for coming on board.
No problem.
So now, let's kind of rehash briefly. Because of the digital age and the ability to share and advertise on the web and to utilize a variety of services that popped up on the web for screening, sex work had, up until just a handful of years ago, become somewhat safer in one sense. Sex workers could have some control over their destiny, who they chose to meet with, and really, in a sense, control their own businesses, despite a negative and the ongoing threat and fulfillment of harassment by the law enforcement community and by what we call NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who profit mightily off of their supposed intercession on behalf of sex workers. Of course, then we had FOSTA and SESTA, and what was the net impact of that? What brought us to this point in time?
SESTA and FOSTA were created to supposedly stop trafficking online, which it really just stopped all sex work.
Right.
You know, the most immediate effect of that was the massive amount of people returning to the streets to secure clients. Where we have had a wave of arrests going on across the country.
Right.
You know, and then when we're talking about people that were in rural areas, now you're talking about people that are losing their housing situation because in the cities you have a physical strip that you can go to. When you're in the country and in rural places, you're bound by communication skills that you create to secure your income. When you lose your main communication avenue, you've lost your income stream. So it effectively made people homeless.
Right.
If it had some sort of an effect on trafficking, one would think that since this law was implemented 2 years ago, that they would have had some massive bust. But it looks to me like the only trafficking scenario that has come about of recent is that crap with Jeff Epstein.
Right.
But that is something that they knew about years ago and brushed under the rug because of who it is and the privilege and the money that's involved.
Right. Ironically, Jeffrey Epstein is a creature created by the very same people, the very same cast of, I should say, of people, the very same milieu of people who have come down so terribly hard on sex workers who are doing it, engaging with consenting adults. That's the terrible irony here. The very people who have sought to save us from ourselves are the very ones guilty of, in this case, the very worst behaviors.
Of course. You know, the ones that are actually doing all this nefarious shit can buy their way out of that trouble. But then when you keep attacking this certain segment of population that you know is easy to continue to criminalize, we're sitting ducks.
Right.
We are bound to the judicial system. And too many times when you get involved in the judicial system, it becomes a financial burden.
Right.
On people that are already experiencing financial burdens. So why are we even penalizing people in that manner, put to the point of sending them to do real prison time for a nonviolent offense? The sex worker is never the one that is the violent party. The sex worker has been the one that has been a recipient of the violence. You know, I want to be able to do my job and know that if something does happen to me, I can seek the authorities without it being a question about, well, what were you doing that put you in this predicament? It should never matter what a person has done when they are the victim of a crime.
Absolutely.
The crime that happened to them should be the most paramount. Leveraging the fact that I have been a sex worker against me in order to not do your job is not acceptable. Removing those codes that we've requested is one step in taking that power dynamic back down to where it should be. It is time for the police to actually do their jobs and stop meddling in grown people's affairs. America's a country that loves casual sex, but we get upset when it's being charged for it. When in actuality, there is some sort of exchange at some point within all dynamics of a relationship.
Absolutely. We need to get law enforcement out of our bedrooms completely. An important first step took place when marriage equality became the law of the land. The next step is to remove that last presence where, in fact, again, we go over this territory often because it still remains so shocking. To make is it still true that in jurisdictions around the nation, law enforcement is actually able to engage in sexual relationships as a manner of essentially entrapping sex workers?
Yes. There are quite a few municipalities that they are saying that it is used as evidence.
Right. So the type of entrapment, if you were a white suburbanite, and I'll use a local reference up here in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, that you would object to violently, if it took form in any other way but a sexual exchange, is essentially the regular MO of a significant part of law enforcement, isn't it?
It's becoming one of their tools that they're using on a regular basis.
Right.
And I don't think that it is acceptable. You know, when did having sex with someone become an acceptable form of tactic in any job description to be okay, outside of being a sex worker in and of itself?
Right.
When you're using sex as a weapon. You're using it to snare somebody to make. It's just unfathomable that the court in these municipalities is even letting this shit fly. Because, I mean, that to me, if I had sex with an undercover offer and then I ended up going to jail, that to me turns into theft of service. That's one of the things that we would like to be able to report.
Oh, absolutely. So effectively, law enforcement attacks a marginalized community, places them in a role where the power exchange takes place so that they can be the recipient of predatory behavior. There is a nationwide scourge of women of color who are trans who are being assassinated in the streets of America, and yet
exactly what it is, assassination.
Right, and yet law enforcement still considers it a top priority to essentially victim shame on a level heretofore thought impossible, where they're willing to essentially use the lives of these folks as a tool in law enforcement, literally putting their lives at stake.
Yes.
So it's in that backdrop that the hearings in D.C. occurred. When you come on, I appreciate the fact you're willing to go over some of the territory again. For a lot of folks, this is new material. This is not an issue that they deal with in their everyday lives. So there's a lot of unintentional, I'll call it, ignorance. There's a lot of naivete, and there's a lot of confusion. Why? And this is a critical point. Why decrim as opposed to complete legalization?
Legalization would still end up being criminalization on some level to some people. Everybody cannot meet the requirements. And it's not fair to ask impoverished people to start meeting a standard that is out of reach. Mm-hmm. If they're impoverished, how can they? You know, New York system, when it comes to strippers, is very complicated. Before you can strip, you have to have a license. And it's something like $1,500. And then you have to pay an owner to dance on his stage before you can even dance. And that's usually like $300 a week. And you have to pay that before you get on the floor. So if they're putting that type of a barrier in place just for people to do stripping, imagine what they would do to people that want to do sex work. Mm-hmm. It would put it in the hands of people that are the elite, the ones that do like sugar baby escorts. or someone from my level of up. I'm on the lower end of indoor escorts.
Hmm.
But there are some that can make $1,000 from one day. I don't have that capacity to do it.
Well,
So that would be out of reach for me even.
well,
And I'm accustomed to working indoors more so now than ever before.
a term that people need to come to grips with that is even more extreme yet highly relevant to poorer urban areas, of course, is survival sex.
Exactly.
What is survival sex?
A lot of people would do sex work just to get the extra money they need to pay a bill, or if they are out of food, if they are homeless and they don't want to do the shelters anymore, they may want a room for a night or two.
Hmm.
There are situations where sex work is also used to have a place to sleep at night, for people to feed you, for you to be able to wash your clothes and take a shower.
Right.
You'll sleep with somebody that you normally wouldn't, just so that you can get the benefit of the things that you're needing that you lacking in and of itself on your own.
Right. And some nights, and this is hard to really put to words, a fundamental behavior of human beings, so basic, like sleep, and I'm talking about the functional restorative power of sleep, the most basic health concern imaginable, is impossible for an entire class of sex workers under current conditions because their criminal status may remove them from either subsidized housing and or shelters. The behavior that they need to hide because of law enforcement puts them literally on the streets, and yet as something that as simple that we take so for granted in this nation, the ability to get a full night's sleep is not even possible.
Exactly, because when you're transgender, it is hard for you to get adequate sleep when you're in shelters.
Right.
Because you go to a women's shelter, the women don't want you there. The staff will accommodate you, but some of the women can be violent. I'm a non-violent person. I'm not trying to hurt anybody, so I would probably get hurt in a place like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then being in a men's shelter, I thought maybe that might be a little bit better because I'm older and I carry myself like somebody's mama. When I'm in the public, that's how I act. I act like someone's mother.
Right.
And I do garner quite a bit of respect. But on that same token, I'm in the shelter and somebody decided to fondle me while I was asleep. And I'm laying there and I'm so terrified. I woke up out of my sleep, but I couldn't open my eyes because I was afraid.
Right.
But I was accosted the last time I stayed there. So I did everything that I had to do so that I did not have to go back this time. Mm-hmm. Every penny I got went into housing. And for quite some time, that was motel. I just moved into a house again.
And you're an adult, you're a prominent activist, a leader in a number of areas, a number of communities within your community, and you still have no guarantees.
Well, this also goes back to the city and the lack of services here. Mm-hmm. I've always been on the fringes of stability here. And it's because of the exorbitant cost. It takes everything that I earn through my job, every penny I earn to survive. I have gotten myself into a mountain of debt. I am swimming in debt because when I go out to do my job, when I'm out here and I see these girls need rides home, I get them a ride, and I'm using my credit card.
Mm-hmm.
Money I don't have. But then if I'm out there and I'm doing outreach, I cannot leave and take these girls to motels that may be in Maryland or Virginia. You know, if it's not in a short distance from where I'm working at that night,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot drive them. I just get them an Uber. I have Uber and Lyft on my phone so that if I'm sending more than one person to one place at a time, I can send two at a time. And I have had to do that quite a bit lately. You know, when the girls get to feeling unsafe and they can't get out, then the police certainly aren't going to help them.
All right.
All they want them to do is move along, and sometimes moving along puts them in harm's way.
Mm-hmm. Because the inability for you to use the web or the internet, electronics, all the modern tools of society to screen your customers, to advertise, to work in a safe space have been ripped away from you. And that's the environment that we now find ourselves in. You know, you are arguably blocks away from, you know, the highest levels of power, if you will, in the nation.
And I'm kind of leery of some of the sites that you can advertise on.
Right.
You know, I do have some advertising out there, but then I'm so leery of the dates because they're doing internet things now. And I don't have that to do right now.
Right.
I have not been handcuffed to be put in a cop car and hauled off to jail in years. I can't do that again.
Yep.
You know, that is traumatizing.
And you have organizations like SWAP, and there's an affiliate of SWAP called SWAP Behind Bars, who, if they are not careful in their outreach efforts, and you face the same challenges as well on a local basis in
Exactly.
D.C., if you're not careful in your outreach techniques, which are designed merely to take people at risk and mitigate and reduce and potentially eliminate risk, and I'm talking about violence, that can be construed as trafficking. And that's the darkest irony of all. Your community works very hard in so many cases to support yourselves and to essentially stay away from the government net. But
We've been in this mode because there was nothing coming from government in support.
Mm-hmm.
They have no support system in place that is accessible.
Right.
And that's why we need to break this law down, is because you are purposely letting people slide through the cracks because you do not like someone else's behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
That is not acceptable. What kind of country are we that we're going to let our own body of people within it suffer?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's not just American citizens. This is all about our immigrant population, too, because they're suffering under this.
And yet
People are suffering, and I am so sick of it. We have a very wealthy society. There is absolutely no reason for us to have the homelessness problem we have in this country.
right.
D.C. has had long-standing homelessness issues. And that started in the 90s, and guess what? It has gotten worse. They're talking about increasing more bed space. For what? Y'all should be trying to decrease the bed space. It shouldn't be but one shelter in this city. All the money that is flowing through this city, and you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shelters, you have got to be kidding me.
And because here's the final lethal irony, is that the demand for your services, when I say you, I mean your community services, have never been higher. The same society that looks to crush your souls, the same society that looks to marginalize your community in ways heretofore thought impossible, is the same society who has an insatiable aptitude it's this insatiable desire for using commercial sex work.
Yeah.
At some point, you've got to imagine that the very same people who are spending time with you or your friends or your associates in the industry are probably going to offices to suppress your rights.
Of course, because it's stigmatized.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sex in film has been normalized. People could sit there and have whole conversations about it. Being in strip club is normalized.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to street-based sex workers and call girls and escorts, it turns into something seedy.
Right.
And that is not fair. It's the same thing. All of it is sex work.
It really, really is. So that's I wanted to spend this first part of the hour sort of painting a portrait of the environment that you all find yourself in. So an opportunity now comes up before the D.C. City Council to engage in an effort. There's actual legislation to decriminalize sex work. In a sense, the Holy Grail. What? Tell me. First of all, I know that you testified last night. Tell me about your Tell me about your testimony. I'd love to get the text of that at some point. If you have that or the video, we'd love to take that and share that here in.
I can email you a copy of my testimony.
Absolutely, I would love to.
I actually didn't get a chance to read the whole thing. I ended up having some eyes, so I just went from the first page to the last and read my last paragraph.
Right.
But it was impactful from the moment I opened my mouth.
I
know
I
I have a short amount of time, and there are certain things that I need to highlight so that we have a clear understanding on what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were a lot of opposition there yesterday, and quite a bit of them were not from D.C. You know, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, you're from where? You don't live here, but you're coming here to talk about legislation that is here in the District of Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm like,
well,
I don't think the organization that I work for would go to New York to meddle in y'all shit. Excuse my language, but I mean, that's just what it is. We wouldn't go there. We wouldn't come to Rhode Island in the middle of your business.
By the way, you're welcome up here. You're welcome up here to meddle in our business anytime. Here's what they're deathly afraid of, Tamika. And if you're just joining us, Tamika Spellman has joined us again. She's a leader in the sex workers' civil rights movement in the District of Columbia, holds leadership positions and policy positions in a number of organizations. She testified this week on behalf of the decriminalization of sex work. And she's been kind enough, after a crazy, crazy week, to join us live here on the air. What they are deathly afraid of, Tamika, and you know this, but when we spell it out for the listeners, a sudden outbreak of sexual freedom in D.C. will spread across the nation. When folks wake up to the next morning and realize that in the same manner that marriage equality didn't bring an end to civilization as we knew it, actually gave affirmation to people's lives, introduced a normalcy, if you will, into an entire segment of the community that had longed for just simple, ordinary lives. When that happens, this word will spread everywhere. When it becomes safer for everybody, regardless of what community you're in, regardless of your economic level, to engage in consensual sexual relationships, there's going to be trouble. Because ultimately, then, the very organizations that flew from around the country to oppose your work are the very people who profit from it right now. There's a lot.
That is true.
There's a
very true. And one of my cohorts tweeted out today that they should have donated their plane fare and their hotel fare to the cause. Where are you all legislating or having policies and budgetary asks within your local jurisdiction to fill the gap that we know exists in the system that puts people at risk of the things that you're trying to cap about against our bill. Our bill is not to address trafficking. It is to stop over-criminalizing black people, to stop over-criminalizing transgender women, to stop over-criminalizing black and brown women. It is sickening that people are trying to take this and make this bill about children, about trafficked children. By their own admission, the bulk of these kids are being trafficked by someone they know, more than likely a family member. So these are people that are stuck by a close relationship with someone, but obviously they've gotten into these children's heads because at some point within that household that they're being raised, there is an issue. There's a need not being met. Because if there was not a need not being met, they would not be trying to put that child to work as a sex worker. See, that's where we're not talking about issues. I solidly stay within the one that I work under, and that is consensual sex work. But then don't come meddling in my backyard and think that I'm not going to clap back. Be about yours and talk about the real issues where money is not being put back in to invest in the people to make sure that they're safeguarded, to prevent them from ever getting into trafficking. If you know that it is a lack of resources, identify where it is and put your budgetary ass in to solve that problem.
You know, the Washington Post unintentionally, I'm just going to quote from their article briefly, came up with one of the funniest, most unintentionally funniest, darkly ironic paragraphs, I think, in this nation's journalism history. I'll read from you. This is from the Washington Post today when they were discussing the hearings that took place. Those who oppose it, a coalition of anti-trafficking advocates, sex trafficking survivors, religious leaders, and several district neighborhood commissioners, argued that decriminalizing the act of paying for sex would embolden pimps, traffickers, and others who coerce and force people to sell their bodies. Now, we know that not to be true. In fact, that's that's the opposite of what happened. But here's the line that gets me. They told legislators, it would turn the nation's capital into a red light district and send the message that residents are for sale. For the love of God, is there any one place that's already living testament that the citizens are for sale and are commodities, and in fact is a red light district, particularly after the goings-on this week with our nation's capital, with our president, the Senate, and the House? If that isn't living testament to the fact that we are all for sale already, I don't know what is. And I can't imagine how decriminalizing sex work would worsen the human condition of everyone from the Peshmerga fighters in northern Syria right now, down to the folks trying to make a living and trying to stay warm in advance of the coming winter right here in our nation's capital. So, it's astonishing.
It is a shame. I'm on Twitter, today, and I'm doing blasts. I'm trying to eat at people. I'm trying to shift the narrative through how I tweet. And I see one of my comrades tweet, and it makes so much sense. So I'm going to spit it out to y'all. Why is it we're so focused on a body sale for labor when every job that is done, you use your body for that labor, whether it's a physical labor or a mental labor. You're still using that same body.
Right.
People use it for harsh physical labor like boxing, football. We have people that work in tech companies as coders. People that work for medical billing. Nurses, doctors, cooks, they're using that same body, the skill that comes within that body to do a job. If you think sex work is just about having sex, you've lost your mind. Obviously, there is another element to it with us because we have a very strong clientele here. We have a very strong clientele. Mine has been interrupted because of federal law and how the police are attacking people. I'm not doing sex work right now because I'm not trying to go to jail. I'm trying to wait until I know how far we've gotten with this law and to see if they're going to stop these negative behaviors. Maybe that last article that just came out about this will stop them because they're doing too much. But to also hit on the other point, what they're saying is not going to happen. It's not going to turn into a red light district. It did not turn into the red light districts in other countries that fully decriminalized. There was no increase in the amount of sex workers. There was no decrease, and there was no increase in the amount of people seeking sex from sex workers. So those arguments that they're using just don't work because I don't know where you're getting your research from, but I don't use the research because that comes from academia. I use studies that have been done by the government from each of these states, these municipalities, these countries that have decriminalized in some form. I think I would take what the live people say against a research study done by Yale, Harvard. You have got to be kidding me. My lived experience tells me what I need. I have spoken and told them time and time again. I'm not getting ready to go through that Nordic model being implemented here. Them even bringing that into the conversation makes absolutely no sense. Because, again, did you write any legislation for a Nordic model as an offer? No, you're picking at minds and you're telling us what you want out of ours. We've been at these tables for a few years now. And it's not like the door wasn't open for anybody to come and talk to us because we work with anti-trafficking boards all the time. So don't say the door was not open. The table had more chairs to it than they thought. They didn't want to come sit because they think they're going to have their way. They're going to force their will and keep it criminalized here in D.C. You talk about the survivors, the people with lived experience. Well, I'm one of them. I'm not going to take some white women from Boston and New York City and Seattle and damn Arizona coming to my city and telling me what my black ass needs. Black, transgender, brown people, queer people led this fight. Do not think that it's just Tamika because it's not. There's a team behind me. Mm-hmm. I'm just the most vocal one of the group.
Tell us about that team.
Because I have had my fill. I am full and I am tired of the way America is dragging me. We're supposed to be a country based on laws, based around liberty and freedom. Mm-hmm. I do not feel liberated and I don't feel free. That's why this law is coming down.
How did the hearings go last night? I mean, what were they like? What was the attitude? Now, I know there were a lot of people who showed up and a lot of people from out of town. Talk about some of the folks who were there to oppose it. What are their concerns?
I stayed until about 5 and I kind of monitored until about 8. And the conversations had changed because they saw that their original tactic was not working. Because the council members were throwing it back at them that the things that you say you're concerned about are not in this bill. How can you tell the author of the bill that helped us work on this bill, the lead introducer of the bill, what's in this bill. You're going to come in here and say all of these nefarious things are going to happen. We're going to have brothels. No, we're not. Brothels are still illegal. It's going to decriminalize pimping. No, it's not. Pimping and pandering and acts of coercion and fraud are still criminalized. So where are you getting this from? When we got up to testify, all of the people that came to testify for the lived experience that was in that room set the tone. Storytellings that we have done, canvassing we've done, knocking on people's doors, petitions, town halls, me doing outreach in the street with some of my sister organizations here, other SWAC members. SWAC is Decrim Now DC. SWAC is Decrim Now. We are a team. It's not just me. I'm just the big mouth of the group.
How did the town? I'm sorry, the city council leave it? What is the next step? Was there a vote? Give us how did tensions blow up?
Ran really late. Now, I know they weren't getting ready to vote because I know all the council members were not there. Mm-hmm. It ran until just a little past midnight, I believe. So, yeah. It was late, and I didn't expect it today. I'm sure that they needed to unpack all of what they heard and to also give the other council members an opportunity to hear everything and put their input in. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a massive amount of testimonies to go through. We're not asking for a vote right now, but believe me, we're going to ask. Give them a little time. You got 2 weeks. But in that time, we're still going to continue to work. Because they need to know that we are dead ass serious about this. I am not giving up until I have had victory. And you just wait until my next initiative.
Oh, my.
I intend changing this mindset with criminality. This is the first one. Y'all better watch my smoke.
That's outstanding. Did you get the sense that the opponents, particularly the ones who, quite frankly, see a revenue stream because of grants, because of them running, well, not running shelters, but running whatever the hell it is that they run, the folks that, you know, the blood money that runs around there, do you get the sense that they're nervous now, that they're afraid of losing their payday?
I don't think that they're going to lose their payday. I think that they were really ugly and vocal like they were to smooth it over with their grant makers. Mm-hmm. You know, hey, they are not opposed to decriminalizing the sex worker. But we cannot keep everything else criminalized. And that is not a model that we are in favor of. When we sat down to work on this legislation, the team decided what was needed overall. This was not something that was thrown together overnight. It took years to develop. I wasn't with their original team. I came into this a little late on, right after the first introduction. And I was like, well, you know, when I got involved, I pushed so hard because I'm passionate about this. And I could quit tomorrow. I'm 52. I don't have to work anymore. But see, it's not about me. It's about the change I want to make sure that those that are growing up behind me don't have to go through the same level of bullshit with our local legislative body and the police.
Mm-hmm.
We need that to be broken down. And then after the study has been done and they see where the additional needs are, be quick about putting the money into it. Don't look back at trying to put no more cuffs on people. We're moving away from that. I want DC to be the springboard for the attitude that spreads across this country. This is the seat of government. And I want to work on Congress being changed. I think they need term limits. I'm sick of them. Mitch McConnell needs to go home. He needs to just go on and fall over in that casket, baby. They'd have been dug his hole. He just won't go home. It is sickening that these people have made a career of fucking up this country. Have fixed it so that they can do any damn thing they want and take as much money from these people as they can. I don't want my politicians to be owned by any corporations. That is the wrong attitude. A corporation is not a person. It is an entity that employs people. And those individuals within that entity are the body that vote. A corporation has no right to be telling my elected official that I vote for what the fuck to do about me. Government has gone so wrong for so long, you have to start local to get to national. I'm right here at the bed of government. I'm going to make sure I change it. The future of this country is begging for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, no truer words have been spoken. You know, it's interesting that people across the political spectrum are all screaming for term limits right now because of this entrenched ownership of government by really all the major political parties. You know, someone like Kamala Harris, who during her tenure in California, you know, worked aggressively to enforce the war on drugs, particularly in inner cities, for the advancement of her own political career. And on one side, and then of course Joe Biden, who his work in sentencing guidelines just ripped families apart, destroyed communities, while doing nothing to attack white-collar crime. And then, of course, on the Republican...
People don't look at the punishment when it comes to crime. We have had the death penalty off and on forever and a day. Has the death penalty ever stopped anyone from murdering someone?
No.
Okay, then why do we have it? We are a country that does not want anyone to have an abortion, and then we don't want to help you raise a child if you have it and you do not have the means to have it. We don't want to give women contraception, don't want them to have abortions, but then you cannot not have an abortion, but then we have the right to kill your child if he does something nefarious.
Well, I mean,
that's some kind of fucked up mindset.
Listen, for a lot of folks, the right to life ends at childbirth. I mean, you know,
exactly.
You know, they're
exactly.
Again, you know, if you look at broken windows policing, stop and frisk, you know, they don't happen in lily white suburbs. They happen in the inner cities. And these are all tools meant to keep in place the prison pipeline, and these are all tools meant to marginalize economically a set in a community that they profit from wildly. You know, we here in Rhode Island, you know, we're fighting millions of dollars of subsidies being put into luxury housing. Incredibly enough, a broken city is willing to spend, in one case coming up, get $25 million in state subsidies to build a luxury high-rise office building. How is that possible?
Yep.
You know, I'm a free market person. To me, I'll confess that right up front. But certainly, we can all agree on we shouldn't be incentivizing using taxpayer money the creation of luxury housing when there is a screaming need in the marketplace for low to moderate income housing. For folks in these communities now that are all of a sudden like DC, the government is effectively creating
thing that is going on in the District of Columbia. They are putting in all these lovely luxury condos and townhouses and apartment homes, and they're not affordable.
No,
I can't afford it. I run around.
And
I'm fortunate that I'm in a house. I don't like apartment complexes. I don't like that many people around me. I grew up with a yard and a porch.
Mm-hmm.
They've come in here and they've taken down all of these row homes and putting up all these apartments, and bringing in this influx of people from out of town, and they're trying to change the face of DC. We had to do a Don't Mute DC a campaign rally, and we threw that together in a heartbeat because they were complaining about the go-go music. The gentrification of certain areas, how they take and manipulate tax dollars to draw in higher income, more people they can tax. But then, are you looking at the overall damage that they're doing to the rest of the community?
Right. Well, I mean, ultimately, who is community for? The people there who have lived there for generations, or are we going to actively spend taxpayer money to create an environment where the people who have lived there are being forced out because simple, again, property taxes skyrocket, rents skyrocket, it's replaced by tax subsidized luxury housing, all of which is, and here's the irony with DC, at least in New York, you can make the point that these wealthy corporations have moved in and brought in higher income housing and brought in higher income earners. In DC, it's literally our tax dollars that are supporting these higher income salaries, whether they be in the lobbying industry or federal employees and or people who profit from the federal government. It's our tax money which is gentrifying the District of Columbia.
Oh yeah, and they're taking quite a bit of tax money too.
Yep. So
when it come out my paycheck, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. They greedy.
Oh, they certainly are today. Well, what's the next step now? Is there going to be another scheduled set of hearings, or what happens now? Where do we go from here?
I'm not even sure there's a need for another set of hearings because there's the arguments are going to be garbage. The legislation is bulletproof, and it was very well thought out. Everything that they came with was not true. Everybody was testifying in the same way. It was like they all got together and rehearsed it. And we sit there like, didn't the person before you just say that? And then the council member said, that's not in the bill. They explained what was in the bill and explained how that one, what they were saying was going to happen, would still be criminalized. And it got to the point where a lot of them were getting angry. People got angry because I guess they wanted to believe the lies instead of understanding what the truth is, or maybe it was just because they never thought that we would get to this point. I believed in this campaign. I did not reveal my whole life and put my life in jeopardy in order to let somebody come in and manipulate what it actually is. They're not understanding this puts me at risk. But they don't care because they want their way with their $1 million corporations that will all this power and out here pushing for negative legislation that is hurting people. Because believe me, I bet you they had their hands in that Sesta Foster crack. They're in the mindset that all men are bad, All of them are white cisgender men. They're all trying to harm people. If that's the case, then all sex is trafficking. All sex is harmful. Just go get artificially inseminated if you want a child. We don't never have the conversation about let's raise better men. That's where it needs to start. We need to be raising better men, number one. And that can start today. So we can get rid of that and get that cycle out of this society.
Right.
Number one,
the
raise
abusers.
better men.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot let it continue the way it is. If this is the mindset that you people have, then let's start there. And then let's shift this conversation to, again, closing the gap in services for what's going on the ground right now. I will gladly work with them. But that's the goal. We're going to close the gap in services. I'm not trying to get money to keep sustaining me in this life forever. I'm trying to correct this shit so that we can walk away from it and stop having to worry about people.
I hear you. Well, congratulations on your efforts. Congratulations on advancing to the argument to a point that hasn't been seen before. You know, it's we can learn a lot in essentially following your roadmap here. And again, most importantly, I believe what you folks have done is literally, I love this term, put the fear of God into a number of folks for whom their own form of predatory behavior, creating these not-for-profits, finding ways to gouge the government for money under the purported victim shaming that happens when you when you conflate trafficking with consensual sex work. All of these folks, their payday needs to come to an end soon. And we need to allow people to live lives of self-determination and create an environment where opportunities can exist for everyone. And if they so choose to be engaged in sex work, then they need to be able to do so safely in a fair, free market without the threat of government literally putting their lives in danger. Because as we all know, trust in the government will get you killed. And
Exactly.
so please send me that your testimony. I'm going to be down in D.C. probably in about 6 or 7 weeks. I'd love to sit down with you and have a cup of coffee and get a face-to-face perspective on what you're doing there. I hope we can meet sometime in the near future. And again, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Not a problem, and please let me know when you have this available through a link so I can post it on Twitter.
Okay.
My fans will hear this.
All right, super. We'll do. Tamika,
All right.
Tamika Spellman, she is a warrior on behalf of the rights of the marginalized, on behalf of the rights of the poor and challenged. Her and her team, a group of people organized loosely under Decrim Now, a variety of civil rights, community action groups have brought the battlefield for sexual rights to a level that a year or two ago I wouldn't, as we were in retreat under Foster and Sessa, I never would have imagined to have happened. And to all of them, we owe a debt of gratitude, because civil rights encompass all life forms, encompass all behaviors. Successes for folks who are marginalized in the world of sex workers translate to people who are marginalized in virtually every other aspect of life, because ultimately it builds decency, respect, a free market, and again, self-ownership. We're going to take a quick break right now. Joining us in a couple of minutes is our correspondent from the border. We're going to talk about what's going on at the border, both in Mexico, New Mexico, and what's happening with immigration rights. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course the mothership, CoalitionRadio.us, where you can find links to our YouTube page and our podcasts. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.